Hello and welcome to the Live Reality Game Podcast. My name is Steven Stewart. I'm back with more behind the game content. In this podcast, I get to talk to various hosts and production members from different games across the country to dig into the origination of the games and what they've learned along the way. And today with me is Justin from Outlast LRG. Justin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Steven. How are you?
It's winter break. I am not teaching, and so I get to do this instead, so life is wonderful.
Nice. Yeah. Lucky for you. I got one more work day, and then I've got a little winter break as well. So that'll be nice.
Well, I was missing a little of my introduction of you. I feel like we're bereft. We don't talk about the experience you've had in the live reality game world, right? Not only are you the host of Outlast, you've had the chance to participate in 6 different live reality games. I believe your first one was Survival Challenge, and your most recent one was it Surviving Maine or Angelica? What was the last game you played?
The last game was actually Adventure Cocopelli. So that was my official retirement. Yeah, was Adventure Cocopelli. But plot twist, Steven, I realized I don't talk about this really ever, but my first ever live game I actually played in college. When I was a freshman in college at Franklin Pierce in New Hampshire, and at that point I was a huge Survivor fan. I had watched since day one of season 1. I was obsessed. I would record it on my VCR and go home and watch it and rewatch it. And so when I got to college, there was actually an RA in one of our buildings that was running a Survivor program. And I was like, all right, I'm going to try it. See, I had no idea what to expect. It was only 10 people, but it was a course of a weekend. You were kind of isolated in classrooms for the weekend as a tribe, and you'd compete in challenges and vote each other out. And I ended up winning it.
So you're a 3-time winner. Is that what we're hearing?
Technically a 3-time winner when I really think about it. I mean, it was such a small scale, right? It was 10 people. But I was thinking about it the other day because I got taken on a reward by the Minority Alliance, and they were trying to convince me to flip. Just like thinking through weird things that have happened to me in live games, and that was one that happened. And they were trying to convince me to quit, not to quit. They were trying to convince me to flip to the other alliance, and I ended up not doing it. Stayed true to my original alliance. Got to the end and ended up winning. So that was truly my first ever experience. But yeah, my first kind of live reality game in kind of what we think of it nowadays was with Survival Challenge in 2019. Yeah.
So I want to back up a little bit. So how did you fall into the Survivor fandom? Were you a day one fan, or did something else bring you to Survivor?
Yeah, day one, minute one. Like the minute. So I'm a very competitive person. And especially as a kid, I didn't always find the right outlets for that, but I always loved games, board games, any type of games. I didn't do a ton of sports, but I played baseball, and I was a pretty competitive kid. And just fell in love with the concept of Survivor, the adventure part of it, the game part of it. I don't know what it was, just like something in 16-year-old me just like clicked with it as something to obsess over. So it really became a true obsession. I wasn't lying. Like I bought a VCR specifically to record. I carried to college a giant tub full of every season on VHS tape so I could rewatch it. In college, I would tell people no one can watch TV during these hours because there was no DVR at that point. There was no like streaming or anything. So like I'd have to like set a recording up on my VCR to record, my episodes. There was like no talking. Like it was an obsession. I used to like get all the TV guides and magazines, and I created like fan art and like all this crazy stuff when I was younger. Not as much anymore, but I found new ways to kind of, I think, show my passion for it. But yeah, I just became obsessed. I loved digging into the cast and trying to understand like who they were as people and make predictions and kind of doing almost like fantasy leagues before there were fantasy leagues for Survivor. Like, it truly connected me connected with me in a way that I've never connected probably with anything else. Maybe my second closest new passion is pickleball that I've gotten just with. Yeah. And so I was always kind of the weird guy in my friend group that was obsessed with Survivor when no one else was. So just something that I've held on to for 23 years now.
The transition from a super fan to a super duper playing LRG fan, it's a big jump to say, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and go starve the woods and play. Your first game, or I guess technically your second, but your first game outside of college was Survival Challenge in 2018. How did you discover it, and what was it like playing that first time?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've always said like I would play Survivor even if it wasn't on TV and even if there wasn't $1 million prize. Like that's the few times when I auditioned way back in the day. That was always my pitch in my audition tape. Was like, hey, you want fans like me who don't care about the prize money. They don't really care about being a celebrity or being on TV. I'm there to play the game and to win the game, and that's what I care about. And I still believe that to this day. Like that was always my focus, is the game and the game part of it. I wasn't there to like have a life-changing experience or anything like that. Like I'm there to play and win the game. So, when I kind of discovered the world of LRGs, it was actually a different LRG that I submitted an application for. I think randomly. I think I got a Facebook ad or something for a different LRG, applied for it, interviewed for it. I felt like I crushed the interview. Like I was so excited. It to me felt like the casting team was like, we would be stupid not to cast you on this season. And then I got the dreaded rejection letter that I didn't get cast. And I was devastated / pissed. I was so angry. And so I was like, screw you guys. I'm going to go apply to more games and I'm going to like get on another one and like show you how good I am. And so that's how I kind of started researching the different, and I had no idea there was such a community of LRGs. I had no idea. I mean, there's even more now than there was back in 2019, but I had no idea that thing even really existed outside of the one that I applied to. So I found a bunch of them, and everything was pointing to the quality and the gamesman kind of gamesmanship, and just all signs pointed to Survival Challenge as the #1 game out there, right? So I applied to that one and I got on it. And I do believe that everything happens for a reason. And the first game I got rejected from allowed me to play Survival Challenge and meet some amazing people. And I truly feel that was meant to be my first game. And so that's kind of how it came about. I didn't tell anybody. I just kind of flew out to Illinois on my own, and like I didn't tell anybody until I was in the Wendy's parking lot, like right down the road, and like filmed a little video, posted it, and like I just like I didn't want to get myself too psyched up for it. I didn't know what it would be like to actually be in the mix. And obviously, a 4-day game versus a 39-day game or a 26-day game is a very different thing. And how you think you'd play in a long game versus like in a weekend is very different. But yeah, it was interesting to experience those types of relationships, those types of challenges, those types of just the game factors, and like what would I do in a scenario where I hear my name's coming up? Like what do you do in that, right? Like what do you do being pulled by two different alliances? So it was really interesting to get to experience that firsthand. And it's very true. Like you should play a live game. Big advice for anybody. You should play a live game as though it is your second time, right? Like that's what they say on Survivor. That's what I would do. I played, I mean, spoiler alert, like my second game went very well. Right. So like, but I just had so much more confidence because I understood what it was like. I had some idea going in of what I needed to do and how I needed to improve upon my first experience. So, I think I learned a lot from that first one. I certainly had some rough moments during my first one that I could specifically pinpoint, like, here are the things that I did wrong. To try to fix them. Steven, I don't know if you're hearing it, but there's a lot of crazy noise on your end, I think.
Okay, I'll say muted when I'm not talking. Yeah,
I don't know if someone's behind you or whatever, but I'm just hearing some weird stuff falling or something.
So you have a distinction, I guess, we're going to say you've won 3 different games, 2 live games, your college game. Do you have advice that when people come to you give, when people say, how'd you do or what should I do?
I think the biggest thing is understanding your threat level and how to mitigate your threat level. So that was my biggest issue in my first game. Was I'm a big personality. I'm a big presence in challenges. I don't keep my mouth shut. And I'm the kind of player that I play pretty aggressively. And so understanding kind of how to mitigate that was a big big lesson. So that's always like trying to be as self-aware as possible. And I'm still, in my 40s, and I'm still learning, right? I'm still learning about myself. I'm still learning, how to be a better human. And I think it goes double in the game, right? Like I think you are, a lot of you're kind of stripped away, right? Like it is kind of your raw self in these games. And so you got to be pretty self-aware about what you're in a game context, like what are the things you have to think about to kind of make up for or balance, right? And so in my next game, and it's kind of an interesting tale, because in my next game I was actually technically idled out, won a comeback challenge, got back in, and I was actually idled out for some of the big mistakes that I already made in my first game, right? I was seen as a big threat, so I was idled out because of that, right? Like people saw me as a big presence, as a big personality, so I was idled out, right? So it's still like I was still trying to figure out how to overcome those things. So that's always my advice for any of my friends that go on to play other live games, is understanding how are other people going to perceive you? What are they going to think of you? What are the elements of your own personal threat level, and how do you kind of help to soften those, right? People that are big athletic presences, you can't also be super social and super strategic because you're already a physical threat, right? So you've got to figure out, like, even if you are those things, you got to find a way to mask them, right? So that's always kind of my advice, is trying to understand how to lower your own threat level. So I think that's thing one. I think two is like always playing as open as possible. It's a little different in live games than on Real Survivor, right? On Real Survivor, it's for $1 million. There are much higher stakes. And so in some cases, I think when you have numbers, you don't give them up. In live games, I think people should be a little bit more open to giving up numbers, and to playing a little bit more loosely, right? And because it's not for $1 million, you can mix it up, right? And I still think you always want to play to win, right? Like I never quite get when people kind of get towards the end and they bring someone to the end that they don't think they can beat. Like you should always try to bring someone to the end you can beat. I don't want to I've almost twice now spoiled the Survivor 45 finale on you, Steven. But I won't do it. But I'd say my other advice is like play to win. If you think you can bring someone to the end that you can beat, like that's the way to go. And as long as you can articulate that to a jury, that's like, hey, that's why I did that, and I'm here to win. And like, yeah, I could have brought my best friend, but then they would have kicked my ass. And that's kind of something that I was able to sort out in the games that I've won. Is I found a ride or die. I typically find a ride or die that's going to kick my ass at the end, but I've always been able to kind of finagle my way out of it, or they're a big enough threat that they become the target in those final stages, and I'm not. So I'm able to kind of like swoop in, little to no blood on my hands, that my number one gets out that would have killed me in the finals, and I find a way to kind of sneak in their spot.
Well, I'm 0 for 5 for winning Survivor games. So I need to play like it's my 10th time, I guess. I'm not quite sure. More maybe I need to figure out how to not swap screw myself so efficiently so often. I mean, that would be a nice skill to master.
Yeah, I mean, they say like Survivor's a lot of luck, and I do think that's true, right? Like I have been on the bad end of a swap screw. I have been on the positive end of a swap screw. I've been on the bad end of some allies that decided to go a different way and kind of screw me over, right? And so there's a lot of luck involved, that you're picking the right people, that the Survivor gods put you in the right positions and in the right swap scenarios or whatever that is. There's kind of being at the right place at the right time. The idol that I found in Real Foot, I happened to be in the right spot at the right time, and no one else had been there yet. So I think some of it is luck, being super observant, right? And when I said earlier some advice around playing openly, I think keeping your mind open to every possibility, right? I think that sometimes people can play really narrow and really focused, and you just miss some of the bigger picture things, whether it's observations or literally things that are hidden around you, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think a lot of it is luck. And so you got to be a little bit lucky, and you've got to be kind of like willing to play through the luck of others as well, I think.
Thankfully, this is not Squid Games The Challenge, which it's only luck and nothing else, and a much
Right.
better game. So during the pandemic, around 2020, you started your own online reality game or org called Pandora. Before founding that, had you played orgs before? Were you involved in the org community?
No, not really. So, yeah, so I played Survival Challenge, and then I was really amped up to like play more. And then like the pandemic hit, and kind of like people were trying to do live games, but not really. And especially in the dark parts of the pandemic, people were looking for ways to connect with each other. And so I was like, yeah, like I'll put together like a casual weekend Survivor game and just like see how it goes. And it kind of just like snowballed from there. And as part of that, similar to kind of how I found out about LRGs, I then started kind of like just discovering all these other online games. And I actually can't remember, if I'm being honest. I kind of block all org life out of my brain now because it consumed me for a long time. And I do believe like once you kind of get hooked in the live game world, it's very hard to go back, and it's very hard to do both. But some people do it, and they do it brilliantly, and more power to them. It was really hard for me to maintain, I think, the org lifestyle. It can be very demanding and exhausting. And you're on a computer all day long, and then you gotta do it again all night to like maintain your org relationships, and it's challenging. So yeah, and I, in a lot of ways, I had some big flops in some orgs, and I think at some point after I played a couple more live games, like I also had a reputation because of the wins that I had. So like even if I did randomly play an org game, people usually knew who I was, and that was never good for me. So
doesn't help that you can Google your name and it pops up
Yeah.
LRG Wiki for a couple seasons.
Yeah. So Pandora was magical for so many ways. I mean, I met so many amazing people, and it was a lot through referrals. It was a lot through, I just kind of stalked some folks and was like, hey, like, I'm going to do a big name drop here, but Chanel, who is on Survivor 42, was someone that I just reached out to randomly on Facebook through a Survivor group and said, hey, do you want to come play this online game of Survivor? And she said yes. And then she played our 5th season, and then I think it was maybe not even a year later, I was doing like a returnee season, heroes versus villains, asked if she'd come back and play again. And she said yes. And knowing she was about to go out to Survivor 42. So she'd already been cast. So she played, and she was like, I just wanted to come play and like see if I could do a couple different things, right? Like test some things of like how I could play. And so that was really cool to meet some folks from all over the world that played Pandora, and coming up with like unique challenges that people can do online or in their own homes was really fun. And it just kind of evolved. It started as kind of like a weekend game, and then evolved to like we did it technically for a month. It was four Tuesdays in a month, right? So each week was like an episode, but there'd be like multiple casualties each week. And but it was one night commitment, and then in between weeks you do what you want. If you have the time and energy to strategize, go for it. If you don't, that's okay too. And but it was cool. I met a lot of people, some people who've come out and now played Outlast, which is cool. And just continued to expand the family and the kind of LRG ORG community. So that's one of my goals, whether it was with Pandora or with Outlast, is to just bring more people into the fold, make sure more people know that these types of opportunities are out there, and continue to build the community.
So talk me through because I don't know much about Pandora. Was it Survivor just reskinned, or was there other things going on? What was the form of the game like?
Yeah, I mean, it was very Survivor based, I would say. We did try to throw in some twists and turns and different things, but it was at its core, it was Survivor, right? So it was typically 2, 3, sometimes 4 tribes. People would sign into a Zoom. They wouldn't know who was playing until they signed into that Zoom, and then they'd get put into breakout rooms in their tribes, and they'd compete in virtual challenges. I built this whole like PowerPoint deck where it would kind of guide them through each episode. They'd compete in challenges. Sometimes I ask them like, hey, you got to get some supplies and things, but very hopefully basic and not super expensive supplies. And then, yeah, they would, there'd be multiple kind of immunity challenges and votes each time. So, the rounds were super fast, like insanely fast, sometimes minutes of strategy time, right? So, it was a little bit of like a crazy, chaotic mess for the episode, and then a week off where people kind of started building alliances, relationships. There was some tree mail that would go out between episodes where there were like codes and things hidden in the tree mail that sometimes earned them advantages. Sometimes it gave them clues about what to do in the episode to earn advantages. So I do have some friends that have reached out and be like, God, I have nightmares about those tree mails, because sometimes it was like the fifth letter of every word is like you unscramble those and it's something, right? Or the first letter in each stanza or whatever it was, right? So there's a lot of craziness that we did via tree mail that caused, I think, a lot of trauma. But so people, we'd go to tribal councils and we would vote people out, and we tried to bring in some twists and turns and different things. Pandora itself, right? There was a Pandora's box that I don't want to say it's a direct play off the Outlast opportunity, but kind of is. There's different things that if you open Pandora's box, this would happen, or sometimes you could risk certain things to open Pandora's box, and so. But it was pretty survivor based for the most part. And then there's like a little bit of an ante for everybody to put in, and then that prize money went solely to the winner. So I think it was like $5 to play, and then the winner would get like $100 at the end. And then so we did 17 seasons, and then 16 seasons, and then a Winners at War was our final season, or most winners came back. Not every winner, but most winners came back. And we did a big prize. It was like a $500 prize for that. There is a YouTube channel. There are some seasons you can go back and watch. We did record them all and put them up there. Season 5, which has Chanel on it, is there. Season 7 should be there, which has Trey and Leanne from the Squid Games The Challenge. So mother-son duo from Squid Game The Challenge is on season 7. And then Leanne comes back for Heroes versus Villains with Chanel in I think it was, I want to say season 9 maybe. So definitely go check that out. It's a lot of footage. May not be worth it, but it was funny when Chanel was on Survivor, and she mentioned Pandora in a, I think, Entertainment Weekly interview. Our YouTube blew up for a second. I say blow up, it was not that much, but we got a bunch of views out of nowhere for at one point.
Yeah, I'm trying to find your channel. If I find it, I'll post it. So
I'll try to find it too. I was just thinking, like, I don't remember. I know it exists. I gotta go find it though. Yeah, I'll if I find it, I'll post it in the show notes afterwards for people. So I guess 2 questions that come out of this. First is, you mentioned before that your Pandora twist prefigured a little bit the Outlast opportunity. In your ways, do you see, like, are there certain aspects or things you toy with or use in Pandora that have found a home in Outlast? A little bit. I mean, I would say the Outlast opportunity is loosely based off of some things that we had done in Pandora. I think finding an interesting way for players to make choices, make decisions, is always something I really enjoy, the architecture of that. So for those that don't know, there for both seasons now, there has been an opportunity called the Outlast opportunity that allows players to kind of risk their vote in exchange for a chance at an advantage. And multiple players go through to it throughout the season. It's typically a secret, not, this season 2 is a little different. It's a little bit more obvious when people might be going, but there's still some secret ones woven in there as well. So that's probably the biggest thing that has kind of been pulled over is an opportunity to kind of earn some advantages, but it's also very much pulled from a lot of things that they've been doing in Survivor lately. It's funny. I don't want to claim like full responsibility, but there were some Pandora advantages that were earned by saying a specific phrase live on the Zoom. It's very similar to saying phrases on Survivor to earn idols. And we did it first. I don't want to say we were the first org to ever do it, but we definitely included that a bunch in the later seasons of Pandora, but before it was on Survivor. So, that kind of stuff, I think, there's a little bit of that. I mean, the biggest differences obviously are it's live and in person, right? So you have a lot more ability to create cool challenges and to create more of a full experience. But I think that's probably the biggest similarity is kind of that Outlast opportunity, Pandora's box kind of twist.
You were able to run a Winners at War, which I think every game dreams of having at some point. I think as a community, like I don't think we have very few games that have reached critical mass. You could potentially even think of a Winners at War. What was it like? When was it better than season 40 of Survivor?
It was awesome. I mean, I was very, very lucky that most of my winners were willing. Pandora became a bit of a community where players would come and actually be on the Zoom and comment on the gameplay that was happening in front of them. So there a lot of friendships got built out of it. A lot of people started to get to know each other, probably much like the Survivor community. It became a little bit just like very intermixed. I don't really like the word incestuous, but kind of like a lot of people knew each other. A lot of people were friends. And so, I was a little nervous how Winners at War would go because of that, right? It was just a very connected network of people. And to be fair, there were a few of our winners that really weren't connected. They played their season, they won, and then they were done, right? And they never came back again. So I was nervous for them. I was nervous for their experience. I wanted to make sure it was a good experience for everyone. And, much like in Survivor 40, a lot of the old school Pandora players got axed pretty early because they weren't as embedded in the community, the Pandora community, I should say. So, it was awesome. It was a really fun thing to put on. And I was very, very lucky that most of the winners came back. It was lovely to see them all and really cool to see kind of how that played out. But as with any game where there are some complex relationships and friendships, it was hard. I think there was some hard decisions, hard vote outs, and like any game that relies or brings players back together that may be friends inside the game, outside the game, or have played together, it gets complicated. So it was really cool. I hope we're around in 20 years or so with Outlast, and we can have a Winners at War of some kind. At some point, we'll bring back a cast of winners, but we'll see. But yeah, it was a cool and unique opportunity. I wanted to find a way to kind of end Pandora in a kind of milestone type way. And that seemed like the best way to do it. So that was, I want to say, December of 2021. Is that right? Maybe 2020. So that was pretty wild. And I do think, so I got the YouTube up now.
I post the YouTube in the chat comments, and I'll have the YouTube as well posted on the show notes.
I feel like there were more. Okay. Yeah, if you go to playlist, for some reason, like if you're just on the home bit, you don't see them. But if you go on the playlist, basically season 6 and on are all the recordings. So you could follow right along. And you'll see like players come back, there's commentary, there's roundtables, there's cast reveals. It was pretty involved. And I was very, very lucky to have a group of people that supported that and were a part of that, both players and kind of the production teams and that type of stuff. So it was fun. It was a good time. And I look back on it and say that was a great time, but I never have to do it again. People are always like, "Will you bring it back?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think so."
I want to talk a bit about the decision to end the series and move on. That's a hard decision to make, especially when you are 17 seasons in, having done this giant capstone. Talking about the decision to say, "Hey, I'm good. I'm going to do something else now."
Yeah, I think it was interesting, right? It was a big time suck for me and it was my own fault. I set up a format in which I had to be basically available every Tuesday to run these things. I had to do a lot of prep. I really did try to make it a very high quality experience to the best of my ability. So I did put a lot of effort into trying to design the game. I did templatize a lot of it, right? Like there were challenges that were very similar season to season, but I always tried to make them a little bit different. I had like I said, a PowerPoint deck, and I'd basically clone the deck and I'd go through and like make as many updates as I could to make it different and feel a little more fresh. But there's only so much you can do. So I think it was a fatigue thing where like, for almost an entire year, every month I had a Pandora game. Every Tuesday I was running it. And it's a lot. It's a lot to have that be such a kind of big part of your life. And while there were many wonderful things about it, it was kind of, I think it was the right time to be like, I think I'm good. So, thank you, Aviva. Aviva is the Outlast head of data science and statistics. You can see all the work she does on our wiki page later. So yeah, Aviva was actually our Winners at War winner. So congrats to her on that as well. But yeah, it felt like the right time. We were kind of coming to the end of the year. The world was opening back up. And I think in my own brain, I was thinking at some point I want to start a live game, and I think use some of the knowledge I gained from being an org producer. And yeah, so I think I was kind of like, I need a little bit of a break, a little bit of a pause before I figured out what was next. But yeah, it was hard. I mean, the people part of it was the hardest part to let go of, for sure. There's just so many amazing people. And I hope, I still keep in touch with many of them, and hope, to see some of them in the applicant pool for future Outlast seasons.
A fun fact, I think the first message we ever had on Facebook was you asking to play and me saying no.
Yeah.
So very fun.
Yeah, I would do a lot of that. I would do a lot of outreach to just anybody. If I saw someone posting about Survivor, I saw someone did a live game, I saw someone knew someone that did a live game, I'd be like, hey. So there's a lot of outreach, trying to get people in the mix. And it's not for everyone though, for sure.
So, naturally, as you kind of mentioned, that running an org was very time-consuming, demanding. And from what I've gathered from doing these kinds of interviews, being a host and running your own live rally game is a walk in the park and no time commitment whatsoever. Sarcasm aside, you mentioned, as you were wrapping up Pandora, you're thinking like, I think I want to make my own live rally game. Talk to me about where that decision kind of came from, and when you kind of say like, this is going to happen, I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah. So as we've said, over the past few years, I played in 6 live games, and it was getting to a point where I'd walk into a live game and I was dead in the water because I had won games. People knew who I was. I had too many relationships. I'll quote Taylor Clark, who said, "You're just too good," whatever that means, like dead in the water. I have no chance in any games anymore. So I knew it was kind of time to retire. My last game was Kokopelli, which was a legend season and had other winners and had big name players in it. And, I did fine. I did well, but like I had no shot to get to the end. And part of that could have been my own gameplay and my own poor decisions, but I felt like all logic kind of went out of everyone's head because I was playing horribly and still somehow was seen as the biggest target. And so I was like, you know what? Like if I don't have a chance to get to the end in a game with legends and other winners, I think it's time. So I was like, I think it's time to retire. We'll just kind of make this the last one. And it was an honor to play Kirk and Dustin's game out in Michigan and have that be my last experience. It was brutal. It was by far my hardest one. The rain was ridiculous. And yeah, and it was challenging. There's a lot of amazing players and amazing people. And it felt like, I don't know. I feel like in life you kind of know that this is the time to kind of like do something different. And so, I'd been toying around with the idea of trying to come up with a live game. The biggest issue with a live game is the space. What property? Like where do you host it, right? And so I was researching campgrounds, and I was, just trying to find a place. And I was like, like I'll just keep researching, and if I find a place, I'll put one together. But I think what really prompted me to think about it was the amount of, I think there's a couple things that I wanted to do differently in the live reality game space. One is really try to provide an experience where it's truly 16, 18, 20 strangers, right? I think one of the biggest issues with live reality games is that people go in with relationships, people know each other, right? And I do think there's an opportunity for a live game to say, we're not going to do that. We are going to do everything in our power to make sure nobody in the game knows each other and truly create as Survivor-like of an experience of strangers, right? With no preconceived relationships or pre-game relationships. It's hard. And, one thing I've learned in my first few years of Outlast, right, is your cast pool is what your cast pool is. And you can try to recruit and you can try to get people to play your games, but sometimes it's hard and it's hard to avoid. Outlast season 1, we had a couple of people that had played online games together before. There was actually 2 people, David and German, that knew each other outside the game, and I had no idea. I researched the crap out of them, and I did not find the one relationship that was actually there. But I really want to try to create an experience that is as Survivor-like as possible, especially when it comes to the fairness of the game and really avoiding those pre-existing relationships. And so there was that. I also think one of the biggest flaws in live games is just lack of time, right? Like when you're in Survivor, you're spending all day strategizing before you go to tribal council. And a lot of these live games, it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, right? And so I wanted to, and we're not quite there yet, and it's not easy, but I wanted to provide as much time to play the game as possible and really prioritize player strategy time and camp time over other things, right? I think there's some games out there that are really challenge focused and they make beautiful, amazing challenges. There's some that are more focused on survival and like creating a really unique survival experience and long survival experience to kind of create more of that survival fit. I want to try to find a balance of those things and really focus in on how do we make this as genuine of a game experience as possible with minimal, hopefully my goal is no relationships pre-existing going into the game. And I'm hoping for season 3, we have a cast pool that really allows for that. But it really requires, a lot of different people to apply from all over the country. So if you're watching this and you've been interested in playing, please apply for Outlast. We are really, really focused on casting people who do not have relationships. So you're going in with a clean slate. Now, the one little asterisk or caveat to that is if you've played other games, if those games have episodes, people may know of you. They may have seen you play games before. That's hard. That's hard for me to avoid that. But what I've guaranteed in the past, and I will continue to do, is like, I'm never going to cast 2 brothers together on a season, or like a husband and wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend, or best friends, right? Like if I know for sure people are related or are super, super close, that will just not happen. Unless we do a format, which is blood versus water or something of that alike. But that's my guarantee is I will always avoid that. And to the very best that I can, I want it to be truly 16 strangers who've hopefully never, ever heard of each other, or know each other in any way. So I think, to sum it all up, since I was very long-winded there, what I would say is I've played 6 games, technically 7 if you count my college game, right? I ran an org, and there's a lot of things that I wanted to do differently and provide a different type of live reality game experience. And so the idea of, trying to create that here in Massachusetts, where, that over the last couple of years, there's been a few games popping up, but there haven't been a ton of games in New England. Now you've got Can You Survive, which is a great experience up in Maine, and you've got Millennium Park, which we're still trying to convince Dylan to do that more consistently. But, in the New England area, unless you want to go down to New York, there hasn't been a ton of games, Can You Survive and Surviving Maine up in Maine. And then you've got myself here in Boston with Outlast, and then Millennium Park here and there. And then games down in New York, right? There's Roysan up in New Hampshire, which I just found out about recently. And I hope to see that continue to grow. But I think having a longer form game here in the Boston area, which is a fairly accessible city, I think was something that I really wanted to help do. So I think it was a mix of my experience in live games and wanting to do what I can to continue to build the community. And, then it just came down to like figuring out how to do it and all the different things that come into play when you're trying to put a game on like this. There's a lot of logistical things. So
before we dig into the logistics, I want to talk about the name of the series.
yeah,
Most Survivor games are Survivor : location, right?
Yep.
And so there is like a Survivor Boston University, and so there's some Survivor games in the colleges in the Boston area. Survivor Millennium Park, like you said, isn't Boston, but is using Millennium Park as the name. So Survivor Boston itself was available and open. Talk about the decision to call your game Outlast instead.
Yeah. So copyright. So I don't know. One thing I'm concerned about, like, I don't think Survivor's ever going to come shut everybody down, right? But like, it was something I thought about, and I wanted something that was a little bit different, a little flashier, something that would stand out a little bit. I always try to do something a little bit different. I thought about Survivor Boston. I thought about Surviving Boston. There's some surviving games out there. But really, I wanted to, as much as this is loosely based, for legal reasons, I must say, loosely based on a popular television show that you might know, I want it to be its own entity. And I do want it to, it allows us some freedom to maybe change things down the road. It is Survivor based in nature. Don't sue us. But it is its own entity, and I really wanted to do that. And for me, and you can debate this, right? I think people can outwit in different ways and different levels. I think people can outplay in different ways and different levels. But like Outlast is the thing you must do to win, right? So like whether you're really good at outwit or bad at outwit, whether you're really good at outplay or bad at outplay, like you've got to be able to outlast the competition to get to the end. And so I like that as a concept, as a word. I think everybody gets to the end differently, but that's the one thing that you must do in order to win, is to outlast. And so, just the more I thought about it, the more that I kind of contemplated what direction I wanted to go in. I really loved, I just loved the name of it. And I wanted to pay homage to the game we know and love, but have it feel like it has its own identity. And then Netflix had to go and steal it, which was very annoying. So we are in no way affiliated with Netflix, the Netflix Outlast either. Which of course, like our YouTube channel got hit up a little bit when like Outlast on Netflix was airing and all of that. People were like, how do I apply for Outlast? And I was like, let's just be clear. which show are you trying to apply for? So yeah.
So the only show that I know that's got a formal cease and desist from CBS Survivor was Survivor Canada, which is now known as Survivor British Columbia. And I think that's because Survivor wanted to have access to run its own Survivor Canada if need be. Hence, you get fun things such as the wiki is still called Survivor Canada because we haven't gone around to changing it because that requires effort. So you're going to start a live rally, and you mentioned that it's a game of logistics. Where did you begin, and did you seek out advice or mentorship from anyone, given you have connections to these other pre-existing games?
Yeah, so yes, and there's a lot of that. So really where I began is I don't even remember how it came up, but I was talking with some of my survival challenge castmates, one of which is Bobby Hunter, who's my co-producer for Outlast. And I was like, yeah, I'm looking for a space. And he's like, my family has this farm. It's in Central Mass. It probably would be a perfect location for it. So it very like randomly happened. I was looking at campgrounds and places I'd have to pay to like rent for a weekend. And so it was just kind of like by circumstance and by luck that Bobby and I were having that conversation, and that his family was willing to do it. So big shout out to the Hunter family and the Hunter Farm property, because we literally couldn't do it without them. They're super accommodating, and it's a beautiful space. Bobby and I are trying to figure out how we can make a lake or a pond or something to do water challenges, but outside of that, it's pretty much perfect. So that was the first thing. It's like, great, we've got a space. Now we've got to figure out what are the logistics with this specific space. This was not built for a game, right? So it was literally just woods and a field. And so there's work to be done to get in there and make it playable, right? So you've got to kind of mow down a huge area for challenges. You've got to go into the woods and create camps, right? And so there's that whole thing, right? So it's the logistics of just making the space what you need it to be. What's great about it is it's a pretty blank canvas, and Bobby and again the Hunter family are very willing for us to kind of do what we need to do in that space to make it work. So that we were very lucky in that actually that part, which I think can be problematic for other games, was, I don't want to say easy, but it was easy in that we really owned it, and we didn't have, I'm not like working with a camp person to figure out what we can and can't do, and for them to have all these rules like you can't cut this down, you can't put this here, you can't do that, right? So that was kind of easy in some regards. I think, you know, the other thing is just, I mean, there's so many facets. There's challenges and building all the challenge supplies and figuring out what can you do within your means, right? We are not a huge team. We do not have necessarily the carpentry skills to like be building giant structures and things, and technically, legally, insurance wise, we can't. So how do we make challenges that are still hard, that are still interesting, that are still feel like games on TV within our means, right? Like, I don't think any of us are professional builders. Any of us are really even like, I had bought my first saw ever to like make things for this game, right? So like, that's been an interesting piece of it. There's obviously marketing it and trying to get people to even know it exists and to apply for it, and for people to trust that it's going to be a good experience and worth the money to pay to do it and to travel. And then you're dealing with people and people's lives, right? And you're like trying to help them with flights and where they have to go and how they have to get there, and like you know, getting people from the airport to the game site, and like timing, and you know, once you start including other people and players, especially, you've got to think about so many things and ensure that they're having the best experience that you can, right? Because people are taking time out of their lives, they're paying money, they're paying to travel, and they're dedicating time, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of logistical things to just keep in mind. Like, you know, we learned a lot in that first season, like, oh, every time people get out of the game, they're hungry and we should have food here waiting for them. And like, you know, oh, right, the crew needs to eat lunch today, and like, who's going to go get pizza, and like, you know, like that kind of stuff. Like, you learn a lot just by doing it. Funny story, I actually didn't mention this, but so the college game that I won, that RA that ran it actually left the college, and I actually applied to the school board, the college board, whatever, the student activities board, to run the game moving forward. And so my sophomore year through my senior year, I actually ran the Survivor program. So I ran it for 8 seasons. We did 2 every year. There was always a fall season and a winter spring season. And so I ran it for 8 more seasons after that, because I did 5 years, but like on purpose. I got 2 degrees, don't worry. So for 4 years after that, I ran the Survivor program. And so I had a little bit of experience from that. Also, my day-to-day job is marketing. So I am used to a lot of marketing things, as well as where kind of my specialty in marketing is in events. So I've been running trade shows and events of all types for many, many years now. You know, and so I have a lot of event experience. And, you know, I between that and then playing in these games and seeing, and I first want to say all the games I've played are amazing, but like you think of things like, oh, from that game, I would have done that differently. Or like, oh, this would be a really cool idea that they didn't do, but I'd like to do, right? And so, you know, I think, and I'm sure people that come out of Outlast also think that, right? Like, this could have been done better or whatever. And I certainly want that feedback from players to make the experience better. But I think playing all those games, my event experience and my marketing experience, and then, you know, just it all kind of came together to be like, yeah, I think we can pull this off. And again, luckily, I've got a pretty great community of friends that I've made through these opportunities and these experiences that are willing to jump in and help. So my production team is amazing, and truly, like, I kind of get to be the face of all this, but like without any of them, like it just wouldn't happen. You know, and they're the kind of people where like when you're sitting in the pouring rain and you have a cast of people in the woods hiding under a tarp, and you're like huddled up in a van soaking wet, and you're like, how the hell are we going to get through this challenge or this day or this game? They're the kind of people that like we're going to figure it out and we'll make it happen. And like, they're the kind of people that just rally in those times when everything is going wrong and you've got to figure out how to make it through and not let the cast and the people that have traveled to play your game have any idea that you're panicking. Right. So big shout out to my production team. They all come together, and we host some production meetings throughout the year to kind of talk through the game outlines and what we want to do and how we can make it better. And there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of logistics. What I will say, another thing that we're really trying to do with Outlast is we want to try to keep it simple. And there are some games out there that have volunteer staffs that are giant, and they have audiences, and they have like huge camera production teams and like all these things. And I think a lot of that is lovely, and I respect all the games that can do that. I think that's not necessarily where we're heading, and to keep it as simple as we can, as stress-free as we want to have fun, right? And like that, as a production team, even if we're not playing, we still want to have fun doing it. And the more of those things that you bring into the mix, the more stressful it is, the more people you have to manage, the more things you have to think about. And so we're really trying to find that line of how we want the highest level of quality possible with the least amount of stress, right? So like finding that line of let's have fun, let's put on a killer game, let's make sure we can record it and make archives and put out episodes that are really, from my point of view, meant to be archives for the cast more so than anything else. First and foremost, it's a game and it's an event that I want the cast to have an amazing experience at. And everything else to me is like cherry on top. If we can do it, let's do it. But I really want the logistics of it to be as simple as possible so that we're all it's smooth, it's easy, and we're not stressed. God, Steven, that was a long-winded answer. Sorry about that.
So given your background in marketing, in events, you've been an RA, or rather you ran the Survivor games while in college. Like you brought a lot of experience into running season 1 of Outlast. But you mentioned before, there were still some key things you were kind of learning on the go. Can you mention any more of those? You mentioned one is simply food and making sure both production and players don't starve.
Yeah. I mean, what's really interesting about it, and I'm sure the real show deals with this as well, right? It's like you don't really know how things are going to go until the players are there and they're doing it, right? So I was like waiting with bated breath to be like, is this even going to work? Like, are these people, like, is the way we've laid out the camp going to work? Are these challenges going to work? So I think, it's really, really interesting that you don't really know how any of this is going to go until it happens, right? So, I think one thing that I learned pretty quickly was like land maintenance is a big thing, especially if you have your own property like we do, right? So Bobby and I go out usually a couple times before every game, and we got to do a lot of like lawn mowing and hacking and kind of path clearing. I was like, oh, we'll just get a lawnmower and just mow the whole thing. That can't be that big of a deal. And it's much more complicated than that. And you're dealing with like flies and craziness, mosquitoes. So I think the maintenance of the property was a little bit more than I expected. But again, we're so lucky that we have that space that it's very much worth it. But just now something every year we try to get better at. So that was one thing. I think one thing that we learned from season 1 into season 2 was providing the players more opportunity to get out of camp. The camps are not that big, and having them feel kind of isolated, and you don't have to like go to the well to get water. So there's not a lot of reasons to get out of camp. You can like go look for firewood, but everyone knows what that means, right? So like, especially if you don't have fire yet or flint yet, like what are you going to get wood for? So providing more opportunities for people to get out of camp, so this year we actually did create a water well for season 2, where we had like a water station set up a little bit outside of camp. So it kind of gave people a reason to go somewhere else. Bobby has some cool ideas about trying to create more paths kind of to and from camp that people can kind of navigate and go on. So, we want to provide those opportunities to get people out of camp, because that's when the strategy stuff happens. And especially for players who haven't played a live game before, this, Steven, you're always waiting for that moment where the first pair goes away to have a conference and you're like, great, the game started. We can now like all stop pretending that we're not strategizing and go have these conversations. But providing people the opportunity to kind of do that as early as possible is really important. So that was a learning of like, how do we adapt these camps or the game structure to provide more opportunity for strategy time and gameplay. Trying to think of like other big learnings from the first season. I think, again, like I kind of said, we're trying to find that sweet spot of kind of quality players and people that don't know each other, right? And so I think a learning that I keep kind of every year I'm facing with casting is like, what's that right mix? I really love the idea of new people who've never played a live game coming to play Outlast. Like, that's a big dream of mine. I want to give them that first experience. But we also want interesting and quality gameplay. And people that are coming for the first time may not take those risks, may not know how to mix things up, may not know how to use advantages. So I think that was a big learning from the first cast. We had a lot of seasoned players in the first season, which was awesome. And the people that hadn't played before, it was really interesting because a couple of them got swallowed up pretty early. But then our final two, spoiler alert if you haven't seen season one, both had never played a live game before, which was really interesting. And so I think I went in with some expectations around, trying to balance live kind of veterans versus kind of new players. And I think there's a lot of learning in just like what we're looking for in a cast and kind of how we're casting people to make sure that, again, we have that balance of no relationships, but interesting game players. And we also want to be as diverse and representative as possible, right? And so I think there's a lot that we're still learning about casting. And again, I just encourage everybody from all walks of life, from all over the country, all over the world, to apply. And if you can do it, we really want people of all abilities, of all backgrounds, of all body types, right? Like when we think of diversity, I think beyond just skin color, I think there's a lot of diversity out there that should be represented. In our first season, we had David, who was hard of hearing. And that was really cool for me, is to kind of see how a player like that navigates through the game. So I think we've learned a lot through the casting process of kind of how to make the most interesting game possible.
I want to dig a little bit into your game design philosophy. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe either we talked or heard about it, you tend to lean a little bit more old school with how you like to design games. Can you give me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I am definitely kind of an old school guy for sure. I think a Final 3 is severely flawed. But anyway, so yeah, I think what I try to do is, again, find a line. This is kind of where I was heading with a previous thought that I kind of got lost on a path of nothing. But I want to provide a fresh and new experience for players, especially players who've played before, while still keeping some traditional roots, and for people to feel like they can rely on some staple things, right? So, I'm never going to say never to most things, I would say. But in the grand scheme of things, I love kind of at its core, the very old school traditional Survivor. I think, when you're a television show trying to make big money, you've got to mix it up and make it different and all these things. I think what's interesting about this is we do bring a lot of people that are playing for the first time. And so, they do want kind of that core Survivor experience, that, they can say, I found a hidden immunity idol. They can say, I wore the immunity necklace. And like, if you mix too much of that up and you make it too crazy, like, it doesn't quite feel like that genuine experience. So, I think we try to bring some new school things when it comes to things like the Outlast opportunity, and some new advantages, like the bank a vote was something that was introduced in Outlast this season. We did have a couple other new advantages that will come out later in the season that I think could be really interesting. So we're always looking for a couple of new small ideas that won't change the integrity of the core of the game, but will bring a little bit of freshness to it. One thing that I'm very, very passionate about is tie breaking. And in Outlast, we go back to old school, like pre-season 4, right? We go back to old school of past votes breaking ties. And I'm not going to say that that's a forever thing, but I really love it. And it's because every vote is a consequence, right? You truly are being held accountable. And I get why they got rid of it. I know that, there's a part of the game where like trying to figure out who got votes on the other tribe to kind of break ties is a weird thing. But I think that there's something about, even if I'm the first person voted out, my vote could matter. My vote could impact the game later. And I like that. I like that. I don't know. I just really like that part of that kind of old school Survivor vibe, in that every vote matters. And if you don't want to you don't want to go out on past votes, make sure no one votes for you. Make sure that those votes go somewhere else. And if you do get voted for, that's a consequence for not building that relationship or not putting that vote somewhere else. So, I think it worked really well in the first season as it became a big factor in the strategy. And I think that's interesting. It's a little bit less so in season 2, spoiler alert. Doesn't come as into play as much, which, so I think with every season, it might be a little bit differently handled. But I like that part of the game, of the old school game. And there's one other kind of old school thing outside of, we traditionally do a final 2. I like that. We'll see if that happens in season 2. But there's that. Those are probably the biggest old school elements that we incorporate. But at the core, we really want to try to keep that genuine experience for those that are looking to see what it's like to play Survivor, or a game like Survivor, I should say. We don't want to go too far away from that. I think, but I also totally respect the games that are super new formats and different formats. I think, that's what's really cool about this community, is if you want to play kind of old school, hardcore Survivor, you've got opportunities. If you want to play games that are a little bit different, if you want to play games that are more focused on the survival element or the challenge element, there's a wide variety out there of different games. And with each one, it's a different experience. So it's really cool.
One of the trends that I've seen in the past year or two are games experimenting with a shot in the dark advantage. Is that something you're like, now that's too useful for me, or you fundamentally like, I disagree with it, or is it something like, maybe someday?
Yeah, I think it's again kind of a never say never. I personally, and I'm not the only one making these decisions, but I personally don't love everybody getting a shot in the dark to start. I could see it in a world where you earn a shot in the dark opportunity, maybe as a reward or an advantage, like one person getting that opportunity to use that as they see fit. I could see being interesting. And I think there's a lot of cool advantages out there, both I think on the real show and others that have popped up in other live games or in other style of games. I think there are some cool advantages, and shot in the dark for me is always just kind of like, and until 45, we didn't really ever see a successful one. I think the threat of the shot in the dark is really interesting. Like, they might play their shot in the dark, so we have to split the vote or whatever, right? Just in case. So I think that it has a very similar vibe to like a hidden immunity idol, in terms of like the threat that it offers. I think there are more interesting ways from my perspective to give those who are desperate an opportunity to mix things up in the game. And I kind of, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. I will never say never. But I think maybe there's a more interesting way to get it into the game, and to kind of play off that same idea or that same concept with maybe not that exact kind of thing. The right word.
So you've played games that range from anywhere from 2 to 7 days. Talk about the decision for your first season to run a 3-day game, and especially a 3-day game where you have the full day being reward, then 2 days just being eliminations, which is, I think, a very reminiscent of survival challenge in a sense. And I think this latest season, you've moved it to a more 4-day season. You've really kind of changed up the staggering of everything.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to find a line of like, what are people willing to do? Real Foot for being a week long was amazing, but it is a big ask. It's a big ask for anybody to take a week off of their life, right, and go somewhere. But I also knew like I don't want to put all this work into a weekend long game either. So I was like, where's the happy medium, right? And I think for our first one, again, we want to try to keep it as simple as possible. We did 2.5 days. And that first day, we really wanted to give everybody at least one night. So that first day was intentionally reward challenges to allow people to get to know each other, to start building on strategy, and to give everybody that one night experience. That I think is really important. And that's something I think Survival Challenge does very beautifully in how they've architected their game. And so I really wanted to and I think we're still working on it, right? We're still fine tuning what are the right amount of people to play and what's the right amount of time to give enough time for strategy. But it's still a doable amount of time in terms of time away from work and family and all of those things, right? In some regards, playing Real Foot, it was almost too much time. Like you had a giant walk back to your camp, which might have almost been 30 minutes. Like it was a long walk back to our camp. You then have sometimes hours at camp and then a long walk back to tribal. I don't know if it's every season was like that, but we had so much time. And for someone who is in the majority alliance a lot, it was like, I don't need this much time. Like someone's going to do something and screw this up. Like it was almost too much time. And I do think in other games I've been at, there have been times where it feels like you have no time, right? Like you almost have zero time. I know sometimes, you are literally, you go right to tribal, right? Depending on how the game goes. So it's finding that right middle amount of time that allows for gameplay, allows for strategy, but it's still doable, right? And I think this 3.5 day game, technically 4 games, I guess, it's 4 days, I guess, but with season 2 is the right amount of time. I think that's probably a format we'll stick with for a while. And it's now figuring out the right amount of people. There were still times we were kind of like behind schedule, right? So we might go back to 18 people, but keep the same amount of days to kind of give us a little bit more breathing room. So there's a lot of stuff that we're talking about to kind of find the right formula. But I think the 3.5 days was the right amount of time. Feels like enough. Doesn't feel like too long. But I think it's doable for most people that want an experience like this. And it gives us as producers a good amount of time to build a proper game.
A brief shout out from Dylan Trzynski,
a
fellow Boston live reality game host out there.
Yep, I'm trying to convince Dylan that because he's not running Millennium Park right now, there's no reason he couldn't apply for Outlast, right? Like that's my pitch.
So you kind of talked about this, but were there any distinct things you once you finished season 1, you're like, that went well, I want to do better on this for season 2?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. One was certainly timing. We ran right up against it on Sunday. We were hoping to be done much earlier, and it just kept getting delayed. We literally were like reading the last vote as the sun was like going behind the trees. Like it was pretty much dark. So that was hard. We really wanted opportunity for the cast to like hang out afterwards, and like we were like using flashlights and trying to feed them Chinese food, and like it was kind of a mess. So we certainly, I think that was a big learning, is trying to pull the finale back earlier, giving them some of that kind of winding down time, and ourselves too, right? Like we were getting out of there like 9-10 o'clock at night on a Sunday. Some of us were working on a Monday. That was brutal. So that was a big thing. It's just refining the timing. I think, like I've said a little bit, like providing them as much opportunity and as much location to strategize and talk and have gameplay was a big thing we wanted to work on. So whether it was water coolers or more time between challenges or whatever it is, that's really important to us, is providing them as much opportunity for gameplay. So there was that. There's a couple like just small logistical things, right? Like we wanted to have seating at tribal council, so the production team had somewhere to sit. So there's like that. So Bobby built some benches, and we had benches, which was beautiful. It was like perfect. We also were trying to figure out ways to ensure, people that are especially on pre-jury, it's hard for them to stick around. We don't like have nearby housing. We offer for them to tent, but after playing the game, the last thing they want to do is like pitch a tent and like do that. So, just trying to provide opportunities for those that get out on the earlier side to stick around and watch and hang out and maybe come back. So I think focusing a little bit more on the player experience and, for some people that travel far along, for those that have seen Outlast season 2, right? The premiere, we had someone come from Australia. And so what am I going to do? Have this guy that comes from Australia, if he gets voted out early, like just go home? He can't go home. So like, making sure that there's something for them to do, somewhere for them to stay, somewhere.
Where you break the game and sure there's redemption for that one player.
Right. So I think trying to continuously enhance the player experience, give them more, as much as they want, right? Some people are like, I'm voted out, I'm out, right? They're just like, I'm done, I'm gonna go home. But for those that want to stick around, that want to stay and watch or stay and help, like we can always use an extra set of hands to like help set up challenges and break down challenges and that kind of stuff. So that was a good learning from the first season. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, there's again just a little logistical things like, oh right, we need to have more snacks on site, more water on site, especially for crews. I try to build in more breaks, just that kind of stuff, and certainly more people, right? Like always looking for volunteers. If someone doesn't want to play but they want to come volunteer, more than welcome. We're trying to find that right balance. We can't have too many volunteers because we just don't have enough space or food or places for them to sleep. But we could certainly, we have plenty of room right now, but I think there's been a lot of talk from the season 2 cast about coming back next year and helping. So I hope we see a good amount of them. And maybe some from season 1 as well. We had a couple this season. We'd love to see more of those as well. A couple also came and supported the premiere event in Boston, which was lovely. So it's a really good community that we're building here, and they're starting to connect with each other, which is kind of fun, the 2 casts. But yeah, I think the biggest learnings probably were just like timing, just trying to really nail like how much time is the right time, what's the right cast size, like those types of things, more opportunities for gameplay, and just some logistical things that I think you learn with every game. What do you need for supplies? I mean, this year we had the worst mosquitoes of our lives. Like it was brutal. And like
I love the first scene. It's just everyone slapping on bug spray. Yeah. That was the first thing everyone did. I was like, ooh.
We bought so much bug spray and it still wasn't enough. We had to have someone run to the local store and get more. It was so brutal. I don't know if it's because there was more rain last year. Like the year before, I didn't feel like the mosquitoes were an issue at all. And then last year was just so bad. I mean, I literally thought we were going to go insane. They were that bad. So that was great. And then, one thing that we had a lot of rain in season 2, a lot more rain than we did in the first season. And so I think we've learned a lot now of like what we need to do to prep for rain, and kind of how we, what we need to think about as we go to handle those scenarios. So that was a good learning from this year into season 3.
Yeah, I saw in the intro sequence for Outlast, there is at least one, if not several shots of just rain. Yeah, and I was just like, that's, and the one tribe I think currently as like may not have a tarp as of the first episode. I'm getting like war flashbacks from my survival challenge season when one tribe doesn't have a tarp. Like
even nothing will ever compare to that. I don't think. I think you win that argument every time. Like that was the worst rain I think I've ever seen in any LRG ever.
You don't wish on anyone. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, I said my Cocopelli rain was bad. It was bad, but nothing compares to what the season 6ers had to deal with for survival challenge. That was insane. And our tribes went through it this year for sure. You'll see it in the episodes. It was a lot of rain. Everyone was very wet. And that's just something like you read it, right? Like they read it in the application where this game is rain or shine. We're going to do it no matter what. But then you don't really know until you get there and you're sitting in it and you're dealing with it and you're soaked and you're like, oh, right, I signed up for this. How long am I going to last in this scenario?
So when you wrapped up that first season, did you immediately know, yes, we're going to do a second season? Was that like, or did it take some time, like, oh, let's figure out whether we want to or not, but, or
No.
was it like, yes, it's happening?
I mean, I knew I did. I can't speak for everybody on the production team. I think everyone did, right? I think it I mean, I don't want to jinx it. I don't have any wood to knock on right now, but like it went pretty much just as smoothly as a game could go. Like that first season, we didn't have rain. We didn't have crazy mosquitoes. It was hot. Some people got a little sick, a little heat stroke. So that was probably our biggest issue. We had one guy like rolled his ankle in a challenge, but like overall, it went very smoothly. Every challenge pretty much went the way that we planned for it to go, outside of like it running a little late on Sunday. For the most part, for a first season of a game, it went pretty smoothly. And again, it's a big shout out to my whole production team for that first season. It went just about as good as any game could go. So me coming out of that, that was like I lived my dream. Like that, as much as I'd love to be on the show, the real show, I hate calling it the real show, being on Survivor. I would love to work on the show. Like I think actually being a producer on that show is like my dream job. And so to kind of be able to have that, and even just a small mini form like that, was amazing. And so I came out of that being like, yep, from my point of view, hopefully Bobby's family wants me to use the farm, even if Bobby doesn't want to do it. Like I'm in. And I think, again, I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't watched the first season, but like, there was some pretty unfortunate where like a majority of our ladies got out early, but outside of that, like it was an interesting gameplay. There was a lot of dynamics in terms of alliance swapping. And I think we came out with a really close final tribal and a great winner. And like, for the most part, outside of our kind of, our ladies getting out early, a lot of our ladies getting out early, it went really well. We had just about everything you could ask for in a season of Survivor. So like, we had someone that kind of decided to leave because they were sick, and we had some great immunity idol plays, and like you had a little bit of everything. So coming out of that, I was like, I want to do this forever. We'll see how long that lasts, but yeah, for sure, I was all in.
And if you're still upset about Sandra getting voted out from season 1, you can go watch her play on Survivor Angelica, their 2023 season.
It's true. Yeah, and big shout out to Angelica. I mean, I played was it 2 years ago now, I guess. And they keep up in their game as well. Their production values are getting better and better every time. It's really exciting to watch. I mean, Survive out in I think it's Illinois, right? The differences between their first season and their second season, mind blowing. Like watching their game was insane. I'm so jealous of their challenge builders. So there's so many really cool quality games out there. I encourage anybody on this channel or anybody that's a Survivor fan or a reality TV show fan, like check it out, go try one. There's so many really great games out there. I mean, Brandon Clark up in Maine is crazy and runs 2 seasons at once. There's just so many good quality experiences out there. And it's obviously I'd love for you to come play our game, but if it's easier logistically for you to go somewhere else or a different format or different location feels better for you, like just play a live game. I mean, I encourage everybody, whether you're a Survivor fan or not, if you're looking for a cool experience, and you at least have some idea of how the game works and strategy, I think that's helpful for sure. But it's just such an awesome experience. So to answer your question, Stephen, yes, I knew I was going to run a second season because I want to keep providing those experiences for people. I think that's I've gotten really good feedback from both season 1 and season 2 cast being like, this was awesome. I want to do more. And to be able to provide people those experiences is just, there's nothing like it. That's why, that's why we do it. So yeah, I was all in.
In addition to running your first season, you also filmed and edited it as a YouTube series, and your second season premiered a week ago, and episode 2 should be coming out shortly. Talking about the decision to not only run the game for the first time, but also, we're going to film it and edit it. What was that like? And were there any improvements you made to that process for the second season?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So as I mentioned, my first game was Survival Challenge, and they put out episodes for our season that to this day I still go back and rewatch. It's just such an amazing archive of the game that we played and the experience that we had. And I'm really passionate about trying to give that to my players as well, right? So it's not going to be perfect. I literally learned iMovie. Dylan, actually, shout out to Dylan again because he helped me kind of figure out iMovie. I'm editing these by myself. It's the first time I'm really doing any of this, right? So It's less so about creating a TV show for me or creating like a beautifully crafted video. It's really about how do I best capture an experience for these players to go back and watch and kind of relive it, right? That's the priority for me. And it's you know, it's never going to show everything. It's never going to be perfect. You know, in our first season, I was really trying to figure out how to like make sound work and be somewhat balanced. There's some hard, quiet scenes and there's some very loud music, and like I get all that, and I'm still learning. So, you know, I think for me, it's important that the cast has something to go back and like watch, you know, whether it's years from now or show their family, show their friends, show their kids, whoever it might be, right? I think that part is really cool. And, you know, those episodes are really helpful when you're trying to promote future seasons and trying to get people to apply, right? If you can point to something and say, hey, like go back and watch our first season, or go back and watch parts of it if you just want to get an idea of it. So I knew that that was an important piece to it. So I think both because I've loved the episodes I've been a part of, and a lot of games do it, and a lot of games don't, right? I think a lot of games focus on live streams, and that's really cool. You know, I think, again, there's a lot of different flavors out there for different folks, but I think what was important to me is that the cast has a way to look back and reflect on it. I'm not looking to get like YouTube famous from it or like make millions of dollars from streaming ads or anything, but you know, it's lovely, you know, to have people watch the episodes live and to comment and to root for their players, their favorite players, to do all those sort of things. I mean, last I looked, we had over 500 views on our premiere, which was really cool. It's only been up for I think 4 or 5 days, and we have over 4,000 views of our premiere episode from last season, and most of last season's episode have at least 1,000 views, which is just really cool. Like, it's cool that people are able to watch it, and I'm, you know, if I had to bet, I'd guess a lot of those views are players going back and rewatching stuff, right? And like reliving their favorite challenges or their vote out or whatever it is, because I've done that, right? Like, you know, so I think the episodes is a important part, but it's more so about the player experience and kind of giving them almost a little bit of like a little time capsule to hold on to, versus like trying to create a true TV show.
Unlike most of the people I've had a chance to interview for this podcast, you began as a player, have extensive experience as a player, and then transitioned to the role as host producer of your own game. How do you feel like having played these games and being in the shoes of your players? Do you feel like that's affected how you run or style the games at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I pull a little bit from every game I've played of like, that was really cool, I loved that, so I want to do something like that, or I wish I had more time, or I wish this went differently, and so now I want to provide that for players, right? So I think, you know, outside of this type of stuff, I also have both performed and directed theater productions. And I think it's very important, if you're going to be a director, to also act sometimes, so you understand what that experience is like. And as an actor, it's really cool to understand like what the directors are going through and how they're thinking. So I kind of apply that here as well. It's good as a producer, and basically my entire production team has played a live game before, so everybody kind of gets it, right? They get what that experience is like, and I think that's really valuable to create an experience for them then. So, you know, I think it's an interesting advantage that I have as a producer that has played before, because I kind of know what they're going through. I know kind of what will feel fair, what won't feel fair, right? Like those types of things. I think that's really valuable. So yeah, just to some extent, I think it's the best way to do it, is to have played these games to kind of know what works, what doesn't work from a player's perspective, and then we'll go and try to create that world for them.
I want to dig a little bit more into the theater aspect. I mean, like you said,
Okay.
you acted and produced in theater. Do you feel like having had such a large experience in theater that gave you any sort of edge when playing Survivor? And I think you've mentioned before, like having that experience has definitely paid dividends in terms of running and hosting your own game.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, I just have experience with being on stage, with kind of being in the spotlight, with performing, right? So I maybe feel a little more comfortable around people. That might be the only advantage, I would say. And I think as I did more and more games, I figured out ways to kind of leverage some of that ability, whether it was directing and trying to kind of manage people and manage the performance of how I wanted things to go and what story I wanted told, what story I wanted to tell, or being an actor and having to kind of like lie, like having to kind of like, say things that weren't really true or play a character in some capacity, but I would say, for the most part, when I play these games, I'm pretty much, you see what you get, and it's hard for me to be anything other than kind of me when I play these games, which I think is hard for most people to be anything other than who they really are. So I wouldn't say I acted too much. I did a little bit at the end of Real Foot, which was really funny. If I go back and watch my confessionals, like, there was a time where I had to kind of act pretty sad that certain people were going home, and I'd go to my confessionals and I'd be laughing about it because it was just like, it was going the way I wanted it to go, but I had to show that I was feeling a little bit sad or remorseful around people. So a little bit of acting, but not too much. And Millennium Park, I did act a little more kind of dumb, I would say. Like I think in one of the opening scenes of Millennium Park, everyone's like, so who watches Survivor? And I was like, a little bit here and there. Like I had to kind of play a little bit more aloof. So a little bit acting, but not too much.
So you played the lead role, Rod and Sterling, in Avenue Q. That play has a soft spot in my heart because I saw it when I was 15 for some reason, and I also have a BA in English literature, so that opening song really resonates with me. Yeah. What is your favorite song of the musical and why?
Oh gosh, that's really interesting. I mean, I think my first love is I Wish I Could Go Back to College, because I do think every adult feels that at some point in their life, right? That's just like an easier time in your life.
Just go get a PhD. It's great.
Yeah. I think people want to go back to college where they like live in a dorm and they don't have bills. Like that's the kind of college they want to go back to, not necessarily like post-grad life. But and it's a beautiful kind of line for Princeton. But I also, like, the songs I really loved performing as an actor were the songs or the scenes where I had to kind of play multiple characters at once and kind of transition between voices and characters. There's a couple of songs that I had to do that in. So those were, if I'm just going to go up and sing a song, it definitely would be I Wish I Could Go Back to College. But the songs that were the most fun or the most dynamic to play were definitely the ones where I had to kind of adapt a lot. So, which is a lot like the game of Survivor. Bring it back.
So you finished your second season this past summer. Episodes are airing. It sounds like season 3 will be happening next year.
It will, yes. So July 25th to 28th. It's another Thursday through Sunday. So those are the official dates. And applications will open in January. So yes, season 3 is on the way. So we're very excited about that. We have some really cool ideas and some new challenge concepts that we're working on already. And again, we're looking for, every type of human out there that wants to play. And whether you've played a bunch of live games before or you haven't, we hope that you'll, submit for Outlast or at least check us out. So that's the plan. So applications will open in January, probably, I wouldn't say on the 1st, but probably soon after the 1st. We've had a few more applications every year. We hope to grow to a point again where we truly can cast a full group of strangers that should have no reason to be connected in any way. And as I said, we're very focused on diversity in every aspect. So we certainly want different races and ethnicities. We certainly want different sexual orientations. We certainly want different gender identities, but also body shapes and abilities and disabilities. As long as you have a doctor note saying that you can compete in this, like, we will make every accommodation. If you have certain disabilities that you need to think about as you play a game like this, we want to be as truly inclusive as we can be, where it's still safe for everybody that's playing. So that's a big focus of ours. And so I hope people will check out our episodes. And if it feels like something that you're interested in doing, that you apply. Episode 2 will be out in early January. Schedule still being finalized, but and then we'll have at least weekly episodes. We might, last year I ran a very long time doing it weekly, so we might at some point throw out a couple in a week, or maybe do like a bingeable drop of a bunch of episodes at once. We'll see. But we'll definitely be posting on our Facebook page, and I'm probably going to be convinced for us to start an Instagram soon. So we'll post on every social media channel we have, to make sure people know what the schedule looks like and when they can expect episodes, and all the information about applications and casting and all that.
You mentioned before that one of the driving reasons for starting Outlast is because there were certain things you wanted to do in the live reality game world. Do you have an overarching vision of where you'd like to see Outlast be or go in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want us to be known for a very high quality game experience that allows people to play the game they know and love, right? And so I think we're going to continue to evolve what that looks like. I would love for us to continue to grow our capacity and ability to create amazing challenges. I would love for us to get to a place where we truly, I mean, if I have an applicant pool where I can build a cast where there's absolutely no connections, that is my goal, right? So I really, really want to create that experience. It's hard because people watch, they know each other, they know friends of friends.
It's a small world.
It's a small world. It's a small world. But there are games out there that have big enough casting pools that they could create those games. So I'm hoping that we get there eventually. I want people to think of Outlast as like, that's the game that may not be the best in certain areas, but overall it is super high quality experience, right? I think for me, it's I want to prioritize the game over everything else. So we may not have the best episodes, we may not have the most beautiful, elaborate, complicated, kind of true to the show challenges, but we're gonna make as all of those things as high quality as we can within our means. Really focus on making sure the game itself, the strategy time, the experience overall is as high quality as possible. So that's my goal. I think that's our goal. And we'll just continue to kind of learn and adapt and grow. This has been a big learning year for me personally, as well as just for Outlast in general. And so we're just going to continue to learn and continue to expand upon what we're doing, and ask for feedback, and ask, for the players to help us grow it. And just continue to hopefully be a part of the community and continue to create a great game every year.
Justin, before I ask kind of some wrap-up questions, is there anything about Outlast you want to talk about that we hadn't had a chance to speak of?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I've said all the big things, right? I really try to make sure that we are as accessible as possible. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think obviously we have a lot of passion for this game. We have a lot of passion for this experience, and I hope it continues to grow, and we get, I want double the applicants this year. I just want as many people as possible. The hard part then is we can't cast them all, right? So it's such this double-edged sword of asking for tons of people to apply and then only being able to cast a small few. So we know that's a hard thing. And as I said, we don't
just pull Can You Survive and run 2 seasons simultaneously. It'll be fine. What's the worry about?
That's not for me. No, but I think the hard part is like people apply with their friends, or they, those types of things. And I just put it out there. We're not going to cast the two of you together, right? Like that's not the kind of game that we're running. And I also, I think what Live to Give and Can You Survive are doing in terms of raising money is amazing. I don't think that's anything that we're going to kind of achieve to do or strive to do. But I think that kind of work is amazing. We have a small gift that we give to the winner's charity, but I don't see us ever like asking people to raise money to play. again, I think that there's a type of game for that, and that's amazing. And they've raised a ridiculous amount of money, which is so amazing. But again, our games focus more on the player experience over anything else. I don't know. I just feel incredibly lucky. I feel incredibly lucky to have the team that I have, and to have the cast that we've had these past 2 seasons, and to be able to do this, and hopefully continue to help improve, expand people's lives and their experience. We've gotten some great feedback, people that have played, and it changes their life. It gives them more confidence. It inspires somebody else, right? I think there's a lot of things that these types of games do, and I think that's just really great. I do have to tell a really quick story because it's the sweetest thing ever, and to me, it like somewhat embodies what I just said. But on season 1, we had a girl named Lizzie Crabtree on our season, and she wore a shirt from Waitress. I think it said she's messy, but she's kind, and she is such a sweet girl. It was her first live game experience. I know she was nervous, and she had played a ton of orgs, but this was her first live game experience, and I was so excited she came out to play and all of that. Come to find out that Matt, all the way from Australia, who's come for season 2, he wore a shirt with a lyric from Waitress in honor of Lizzie, because he was so inspired by her story and her play.
I was wondering about that.
And it was just the sweetest moment to know that like Lizzie Crabtree from Connecticut inspired Matt from Australia to like be a part of Outlast and like wear this shirt in honor of her. And it was just like the sweetest moment of like, wow, like that's a connection that we as an Outlast team, we have made. I don't know. It was just a really beautiful moment for me. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff I love. Like, those are the kind of things that I want Outlast to do. It is a game, and I hope everyone comes out with a positive experience. But beyond that, there are these types of moments that happen because of these games. And it's wonderful.
So I have a couple of final, just rapid questions.
Sure.
What piece of advice would you give the other aspiring game creators out there?
Just surround yourself with amazing people that are smarter than you and better than you at things, and that will call you out on your bullshit when you're doing stupid things, and put you in check when you need to be, and also support you when you have crazy ideas. Truly, it Bobby and Travis and Angela and Jess and Josh and Dan and my entire volunteer staff, like these people are amazing, and like, again, it wouldn't happen without them. And the support that they provide me, that they provide the game, it's so important to have a team behind you that believes in you and believes in what you're creating and believes in in creating this experience. So I think just surrounding yourself with the right people, and that's the number one thing.
If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice before you ran your first game, what would you tell yourself?
I think that I would say it doesn't have to be perfect. I think anytime you bring this amount of people together to do something that nobody has done before, or, if you're doing it for the first time, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? And especially like some of the little things that didn't go exactly perfect, the players never knew. They had no idea. They may have not even seen it. They may have not even felt it or experienced it, right? So I think it doesn't have to be perfect. I think much like when you're a player in the game, adapting is a big part of it. So as things maybe happen a little bit differently than you thought, or they don't go quite, the way you would hoped, that's okay. Just know it doesn't have to be perfect. And at the end of the day, if you've created a good overall experience and everything is as fair and as balanced as it can be, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect.
What is one of your favorite memories from running Outlast these past 2 seasons?
Oh gosh. I think for season 1, again, if you haven't watched and you don't want to know spoilers, don't listen for a second. But it was really, really cool to me to see our winner emerge from being in such a bad minority and getting through a swap screw and continuously kind of being a target and then winning at the end. It truly felt like a Survivor story to me. And we had like correctly played idols. Like I said, we had all these like elements from the real show. We had a tie vote. We had like all these things. And I was like, that it's like mind blowing to me. It's like, this feels like a real game of Survivor. So that was like, I think at a high level, like the whole overall experience of the first season was just, it felt, I think, and I hope that everyone will take this as a joke, right? Like a bunch of women going early. That's very Survivor, right? Like that's very Survivor. Like, so like as horrible as it was, I was like, this feels like a real season of Survivor. And then you see how much that first season impacts the second season. No spoilers, but like things are very different in the second season, right? And so people will watch that first season, they come in with a little bit of an idea of what's going to happen. And so I think, you know, I loved how true to the Survivor format and Survivor, so things that we know and love about Survivor, like we had a Final Four fire making challenge, right? Like all the things you could ever want out of a Survivor season, we had in that first season about Outlast. So just as an umbrella moment, like just all of those things were so cool. I will also say one of my other favorite moments, our head of video production last year, Hannah, brought up the challenge where people had to dump solo cups of water on each other's heads last season in season 1 was one of the funniest things I've ever been around. And like going in, I was like, I don't know how this challenge is going to go, but we'll see. And it was so fun. Like it was such a fun challenge to produce and to kind of host. So just kind of thinking about little moments like that was one. And also like, I don't know, every time someone won immunity and how excited they would get and like putting that necklace on them and them just like feeling like I've always wanted to have this feeling of what it's like to have the immunity necklace on, and now I have it, was really, really cool. So like, I think the things that are most authentic to the game of Survivor that we know and love and that we all are excited about, like the stuff, when that stuff happens, those are probably my favorite moments. And then anytime the cast gasps because they're surprised by something we're doing, that's just chef's kiss. It's like anytime you can kind of shock the cast, like that's the best, right? Like you want them to be staying on their toes. You want them to be surprised, as long as it fits within the rules and the confines of what you've created, right? So I would never do anything so drastic that it's a bad shock. I don't think. But I like when the contestants are surprised. Those moments have been really, really special as well.
And finally, what would you like to see more from the live rally game community?
Oh boy. You know, I do think trying to create, I just keep harping on this because I've been so screwed by pre-existing relationships in the games I've played, you know, really trying to, when you have the means of a casting pool, really trying to avoid pre-existing relationships. I think it's such a big factor. Every game I've played, literally every game I've played, there's been some sort of pre-existing relationship. And in my first game in Survival Challenge, it almost took me out. And if my ally didn't play an idol for me, it would have taken me out. My second game, I got idled out because of a pre-existing relationship, and you know, just flowed from there. Like, luckily, I got back into that game and I won, so it all worked out. It was fine. But every game I've played, pre-existing relationships have been such a factor that it truly alters the direction of the game, and that people make decisions because of those pre-existing relationships that they never would make in a normal capacity if it was a stranger, right? So I would love to see games prioritizing more of that. You know, I see cast photos and I'm just like, those 5 people just played a game together, or they know each other, or whatever it is, right? Like I've seen games where literally like 4 people in my season 1 cast of Outlast are now all playing together, right? And like, no fault on them. Like they, you know, it may not bother them, but I would just love to see more of that, prioritizing that. And not all games have the luxury of large casting pools, and I get that. We don't have that luxury either, right? We're still working towards that, but I think the games that do, and the folks that do, I hope that they'll do that. And then I'd also just love to see more positivity from the community in support of these games. It takes a lot of work, and people bust their ass to create these things. Most of the time we don't, I mean, I don't get paid for this. I do it because I love it. I don't think any hosts get paid for it. I think in a lot of ways hosts probably lose money because you throw in your own money here and there when you need something, right? And sometimes games get slammed for a lot of things. For, you know, we had some feedback that it was really unfortunate that, you know, so many women went out in the first season of Outlast early. And I was like, I agree, you know, and I hope you know that's not what I wanted, and that's, you know, there was nothing that I certainly am not going to influence the game to change that. There are some games that get blasted for not being diverse enough, and while I wholly agree and support that and want that, you also have a casting pool that you have to work within. You can't beg people to play your game. We try, and, you know, sometimes you just got to work within the casting pools that you have, and as long as you're making every effort to bring diversity into your games, you know, and you're doing the right things and trying to diversify your production team, which we're still working on the Outlast side as well. Like, I would love to bring more diversity into our production team, but again, you can't beg people to do that. They have to want to do it, right? So I hope there's more support and positive feedback and positive reinforcement and ideas, more so than slams, when it comes to that kind of stuff, because we're all just here, like, doing things that we love and trying to create experiences for other people, and supporting each other in doing that, as opposed to blasting them for things that I think most of the time are out of their control. Maybe not every time, right? There's probably some bad decisions or bad things that happen out there, but for the most part, we're all here trying to do our best. And so I hope the community will continue to support each other in doing that, because I think, you know, that's really important.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it, talking to you and digging more into the history of Outlast and just, you know, some of the things you've learned along the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Steven. As always, you're the best, and I appreciate you creating all this content for us. It's super helpful in promoting our games and continuing to build the community, and continue to kind of have some life on these pages when it's not live game season. So
it is the long off season, right? Well, this is the short off season between Survivor and also live reality games. So thank you again, Justin. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I will be back next week to talk a little bit about Survivor Brooklyn South. So you'll see that notification coming out soon. And have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks.